Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, a perfect episode number 18 Black Sails. This video is the first in my A Perfect Episode series where I highlight an episode I feel is of worth and should be spotlighted from one of my favorite shows. These videos come in no particular order, and I'm not ranking my favorite episodes. They are simply episodes I feel are brilliant, works of art in their own right that should be showcased. In this video, I will examine the episode 18 from the show Black Sails. Now, Black Sails didn't really have names for their episodes, just numbers, so this is the 18th episode of the show, hence the title. This episode is the Season 2 finale of Black Sails, and Season 2, I feel, is the best season of the show and where the show really peaked. So I will have to start with a spoiler warning for Black Sails up to the end of Season 2. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So before I start my deep dive into the episode, I feel I need to set the stage for Black Sails Season 2. Black Sails, like most of my favorite shows of the modern era, that is the golden age of television, is highly serialized and tells one story over the course of many episodes. And after watching this episode, I realized that I also could have easily chosen the episode that aired before this one, 17, for my perfect episode series. In fact, I feel like I may like that episode better, as that's kind of where the season peaked, and it ended on a very shocking, intense moment. However, 18 is where the season concludes in an epic fashion, so I feel it was more appropriate to look at this episode. However, it's basically Season 2 of Black Sails as a whole that I feel is brilliant. So, in Season 1 of Black Sails, we're introduced to the character of Mrs. Barlow, a wealthy woman living alone on the island that Captain Flint has an affinity for. And frankly, I never liked this character, and I thought the scenes and episodes that focused on her were really boring, so I was not delighted in Season 2, where we got a storyline that featured flashbacks about how Flint knew her before he became a pirate when he was a captain in the Royal Navy. And it tells of his friendship with Mrs. Barlow's husband, and it appears the story is leading to a love triangle where Flint has an affair with Miranda Barlow. But instead, it turned out Flint was having an affair with her husband, Thomas Hamilton, which to me was a lot more shocking and subverted expectation. Also, the storyline followed Hamilton's plan to solve the pirate situation in the Caribbean by trying to make peace with them, a tactic that was not very popular. His efforts ultimately failed, which led to Hamilton being incarcerated in an asylum, and Flint and Mrs. Barlow being forced into exile, where ultimately Flint became the infamous pirate captain. However, during this time, Flint and Hamilton had an ally, a man named Peter Ashe. And in current time, Ashe is the governor of the Carolina colony in Charlestown. Season 2 has a storyline where Ashe's daughter is taken captive by bloodthirsty pirates, and Flint rescues her from the pirates, and he and Mrs. Barlow hatch a plan to return her to her father and propose a peace between the British Royal Navy and the pirates, just like Thomas Hamilton wanted. This conversation takes place in the previous episode, 17, when they return Ashe's daughter to him and make their proposal for peace. However, during this conversation, it is revealed that Peter Ashe had betrayed Thomas Hamilton, which directly resulted in his incarceration and Ashe's promotion to governor. Mrs. Barlow was so outraged upon learning this and screamed at him that she wanted to see him dead and Charlestown destroyed. In response, Ashe's lieutenant shot her in the head, murdering her in cold blood, and Flint was arrested and plans were made for a very public trial before his very public execution. This despite the fact that they had both just saved Ash's daughter's life and returned her to him. So that is where this episode begins. So you must forgive me as I deep dive into this episode. I'm going to focus more on the scenes that tell this storyline, as that is what I feel makes this episode so great. And I'm going to more or less gloss over the scenes that deal with subplots that I find a little less interesting than the main plot. So the episode begins with a scene where Peter Ash approaches his daughter, Abigail, to tell her that he's sending her away to Savannah while Flint's trial takes place. Now, Abigail, for her part, seems very disconnected as she's very numbingly pounds on a piano. So when her father tells her he's sending her away, she simply asks why. And Peter responds by asking her if she knows what's going to happen, and she responds that she does, that he's going to execute Mr. McGruel. Now, of course, McGruel is Captain Flint's original name, the one he carried when he was a captain in the Royal Navy, and thus it carries significance when Abigail uses it here. It illustrates that she doesn't see him as some evil pirate, but a kind man who saved her life and thus is torn apart on the inside that her father is going to have him killed. Peter, of course, tries to placate her and tells her that he's sending her away for her own safety, but Abigail correctly challenges that and asks if he's sending her away for her well-being or for his. She asks if he's sending her away so that she doesn't tell the truth about what happened, that two people saved her and cared for her, and one was murdered and the other one is going to be executed. So she points out that it seems to her that the only person who appears to have committed a crime in all of this still works for him. And Ash, of course, has no response to this, because he's basically having them killed to cover up his shame, to cover up the crimes of his past, and he has no way he can actually justify this to his daughter, especially since it's apparent that she can see right through him. So he says nothing. And as we later learn, he does in fact send her away. And it definitely is to remove her from the equation of the trial, because her role does complicate matters and interferes with his narrative that he's selling to the public, that Flint and Barlow came to execute him and they're getting justice. And I'm sure Ash's plan is just to not speak of it, send her away, and when she returns, act like it never happened. And it's absolutely a brilliant scene that exposes just how much of a slime ball Ash is. So then we go to Flint's ship, which is docked outside of Charlestown. This follows the storyline where Flint's greatest pirate adversary, Charles Vane, plotted to take Flint's ship while he was away in Charlestown. His plan worked, however, once he learned Flint was taken prisoner and planned to be executed, he realized that he couldn't let that happen. Despite being at odds with Flint, Vane realizes that having such a public execution of an infamous pirate will seriously diminish his ability to operate and continue pirating and overall hurt their cause. So in this scene, we see Vane trying to justify his decision to his first mate, Jinx, whom he's leaving in command of the ship while he goes to rescue Flint. Jinx questions Vane on what he's supposed to tell his men, as all the men think that rescuing Flint is a good idea, are going with Vane on this mission, leaving Jinx alone with the ones who thinks it's a bad idea. So Jinx asks Vane how he's supposed to stop these men from just taking the ship and leaving. Vane answers that rescuing Flint is in all of their best interests, whether they know it or not, But Jinx simply replies by saying, once they're done having their laugh, then what do I tell them? So Vane then replies that he tells them that if they try to leave on a skeleton crew, they'll get caught and be killed, which is a more practical response. However, we later learn that Jinx himself is one of the men who thinks that this is a bad idea and wants to leave. Either he's too cowardly to admit it to Vane, or he is just deceiving him. So once Vane leaves, Jinx will try to come up with a way to get more crew so they can successfully abandon Vane, which will comprise the subplot. It's an interesting premise as it illustrates how much pirates cannot be trusted. So then we go to the town square in Charlestown where Flint is being held and showcased for everyone to see, and we see a government official pronounce the charges against Flint, which are mostly accurate but of course exaggerated and dramatized for theatrical effect. Peter Ashe then goes to Flint in private and pleads with him to confess. He claims to speak as a friend, telling him that this isn't what he wanted and that he would love for this public showcase to end, and if only Flint will sign a confession, it will allow him to quietly and peacefully end his life. Of course, Flint isn't buying any of it and just glares at him in silence. However, Ashe hits on a nerve when he puts Mrs. Barlow's dead body, which the town people are mocking and throwing rotten vegetables at, and tells Flint that she wouldn't want to be remembered like this. That's when Flint breaks his silence to say that she was very clear about what she wanted, and it didn't have anything to do with begging his forgiveness. Flint then asks Ashe why he betrayed Thomas Hamilton. He asks, was it just for this petty lordship, or did he do it because he was too weak to say no to those in power? Because he was a coward. Flint says that he could understand that and could even possibly forgive that. But Ashe says nothing, and the look on his face tells it all, though, as the hurt is apparent, and this was an amazing acting on the actor's part. Flint states that his silence is his answer, as even alone with a condemned man, Ashe can't speak the truth. And like the earlier scene with Ashe's daughter, this reaffirms that Ashe is in fact a weak man who hides behind authority but refuses to own up to what he's done. And speaking of amazing acting, we get more from Toby Stephens, who plays Flint, as the government official denounces Mrs. Barlow as an evil minion, and the townspeople yell profanities at her. The hurt and utter rage hidden behind his expression, it tells all. It's just amazing. So we also get several scenes in a subplot that I'll just bunch together and talk about at once, as to me it isn't what makes this episode great. These scenes deal with the aftermath of Mrs. Guthrie being arrested and taken to England, and the power vacuum and chaos that she leaves behind. Many of the pirates celebrate her capture, not aware that it's ultimately going to be bad for them. The lords try to figure out what to do, many of them deciding to flee, while Max makes a power grab to try to fill the spot Eleanor Guthrie left behind. She promises to be a softer, more understanding, and better ruler than Guthrie was, although many don't buy it, but nonetheless her power grab is successful. Next, we get a scene involving another subplot. This is the Spanish gold that will eventually make up the treasure in Treasure Island. This plot was first brought up in Season 1, and Captain Flint had chased it, but then it seemed out of reach. However, a few people, including Max, are aware it's still out there for the taking, so she sent Jack Rackham and Anne Bonny to retrieve it. Their crew is unaware of their mission when they set sail, so this scene shows Rackham's first mate explaining it to the crew while Jack and Bonnie stand off to the side and discuss more personal matters. There was a storyline this season where Bonnie had an affair with Max, who was trying to form a rift between Bonnie and Rackham. And frankly, I didn't really care for this storyline as it seemed forced and out of the blue and kind of out of character for Bonnie. However, this was a nice scene as Bonnie comes to terms with her feelings for Jack as he saved her at a young age, and she forever felt indebted to him, but she makes it clear that she can't be his wife, but that she'll be his partner until the day they die, as long as he feels the same. And he simply responds by hugging her. It's a sweet scene that nicely defines the dynamic pretty well. So then we go back to Charlestown, where the show trial has begun, and the prosecutor accuses Flint of countless heinous crimes in a most theatrical fashion for all the townspeople to see. Flint, however, sits and says nothing as he can see the sham trial for what it is and sees no benefit in participating in it. However, when Flint refuses to say anything, the prosecutor demands a response, telling Flint to deny or to repent, but to say something as no one else will speak on his behalf. But when Flint continues to refuse to talk, the prosecutor tells the crowd that his crimes are so vile that even its perpetrator is struck dumb when confronted with them, which is an attempt to use Flint's own silence against him. So to that, Flint does have a response. He tells all of those assembled that his only regret is to think reconciliation with the British Empire was possible, that reason could be a bridge between them. Everyone is a monster to someone, he tells them, and since you are so convinced that I am yours, I will be it. Now, this is a very powerful moment, as throughout the first two seasons he was hoping for some peaceful resolution between the pirates and the British Empire, some way to coexist, which is in fact what Thomas Hamilton wanted. But after what just happened with Ash betraying them and murdering Mrs. Barlow, that part of him that was Captain McGrew is dead, and he is entirely Captain Flint, the ruthless pirate captain, which is in fact a turning point for his character in the series. It's when he throws off all pretense of being civilized and is resolved to be a ruthless pirate. And again, the way the actor performs is just excellent, as you can hear the hatred and spite with every word. Next, Charles Vane shows up in chains as several soldiers escort him in. The prosecutor asks if they've captured him, but they say that he surrendered himself to them. Vane then states his name and says that he's come to offer testimony on behalf of James Flint. Ash then asks that if he is who he says he is, why should they believe a word he says? But Vane clarifies that it isn't his own testimony that he offers, but that of Ash's own daughter. The soldiers hand Ash a book that Vane was carrying. Ash examines it to find that it is, in fact, the writing of his daughter. In private, Ash and the prosecutor review the book and find that it does support Flint, and it sort of damages their case against him. Ash suggests making the book disappear. The prosecutor tells him that sure, he could simply throw it in the fire if he wanted to, but the question is, should he? And he thinks that he shouldn't. He tells him that dozens of people saw him handed the book and saw his reaction to it in public. It would look terrible if the book just disappeared. Ash then voices his concern that all it takes is one juror to buy into Flint's story and he goes free. However, the prosecutor insists that Flint isn't going anywhere. That they had rigged the jury to ensure that that does not happen, and he assures Ash that the only thing that's going to come of this book is that people will have their doubts and it will be a bit of a scandal, but it will blow over in a couple of months. In the meantime, they'll hang Flint, then move over to Vane and hang him as well. So they seem to have the situation rigged and in control, which is a great way to build tension for what happens next. So then we get several scenes on Flint's ship where Jinx talks to his henchmen about how he doesn't trust Vane and he just wants to leave, but they don't have the man to power the ship in order to do it. They're then approached by a slimy man in Flint's captured crew who suggests to them to use John Silver, who knows the crew well, to give them the names of those most likely to cooperate with Jinx. So Jinx has his men go to Flint's captured crew and retrieve John Silver. However, when they take him, the crew fight back and start a brawl, but are ultimately defeated. Jinx then confronts Silver and asks him to provide a list of 10 men who would be willing to help them leave. Silver asks what's going to happen to the men not on that list, and Jinx just stares at him, making the answer clear. So Silver refuses to provide him with this list. Jinx then immediately kills the slimy man and then begins to torture Silver. They proceed to smash his legs with a sledgehammer, but still Silver refuses to talk. Eventually, Jinx decides Silver won't talk and just goes to kill him when there's a knock at the door. Jinx yells, "What?" but gets no response. Silver tells him the question that he should be asking himself is what happened to his keys, as he probably hasn't seen them since he took him from his men. Meaning that the brawl was just a distraction so that Billy Bones could steal the keys to the chains, and sure enough, Billy Bones and his men come pouring through the doors and they kill Jinx and his men and retake the ship. This is the kind of pirate action scenes that make the show really intense and a thrill to watch. In Charlestown Square, an official drones on reading the journal of Abigail Ash while the crowd pays full attention to him. The words seem to exonerate Flint, but as illustrated in the earlier scene with Ash, it will make no difference to the outcome of the trial. So Flint asks Vane in private what he's doing there. Vane answers that he came to take his ship, but he stayed to get him out of this situation. Flint asks Vane if his plan was just to read a little girl's journal, and Vane answers more or less. However, Flint knows Vane better than Ash does, so knows that there's more to his plan than just that. So Flint says that while everyone's eyes are now where he wants them to be, on the two of them, so what's going to happen? And then we cut to Vane's men climbing the walls of Charlestown and seizing control of the cannons stationed there. As in fact, Vane's plan was to use the trial as a distraction to seize control of the town's cannons and wreak havoc so that they can escape. Flint tells Vane that when it happens not to get in his way, but Vane says that when it happens they're just going to make a run for the jetty, as he didn't come all this way just to have Flint get killed so close to the gallows. However, Flint tells Vane that they all convince themselves that they have nothing to be afraid of, and that they need to be reminded that they were right to be afraid. So Vane, seemingly convinced by this, stands up, interrupting the reading of Abigail's journal. When the prosecutor commands him to sit back down, Vane ignores him and speaks directly to the crowd and tells them that the governing body has convinced them that they speak for the people and that the power the people have given them is in the people's interest and that Flint is their enemy. Ignoring the prosecutor's attempt to quiet him, Vane then says, "For those of you who see tomorrow, know that you had the chance to see the truth, but you let yourselves be convinced otherwise." That, of course, grabs Ash's attention, and the prosecutor's eyes go wide as it is a clear and imminent threat. Vane then raises his hands in the air and has the prosecutor desperately calls for Vane to be removed. Vane lowers his hands to give the signal for his men to start bombing the city. Then chaos ensues. So this scene is amazing in many ways. First, it shows that Flint isn't simply content with surviving, because he could easily escape, but he wants the people of Charlestown to pay. Now, part of that is strategy, as he wants them to fear the pirates, as this will allow them to reign more free. If people are more afraid of them, as they will be less likely to interfere. But part of this, of course, is motivated by revenge, to bring ruin and destruction to the people that betrayed him and the man he loved, and the people that killed Mrs. Barlow in cold blood. Now, Vane seems to follow his lead, and which is why he speaks directly to the people, trying to discredit the government and to cast them in the role as the villain, in a way trying to cast the blame on them for what's going to happen next. In a way, also telling the people that what's going to happen next is partly their own fault for letting themselves be deceived by the governing body. Now, it isn't exactly accurate, but it will be effective in creating the fear and discord in the government that ultimately could weaken its power and strengthen the pirates' power. And thus, this is a brilliant, blood-curdling scene. So then, all chaos does break out as cannonballs explode the city around them and people run for their lives. We see innocent women and civilians being mutilated by the carnage. And of course, Flint and Vane take advantage of the chaos to attack their guards and grab their weapons and kill them as they try to kill anyone who tries to stop them. After killing a man that had tried to stop him, Flint catches Ash trying to escape and goes straight for him, quickly killing Ash's guard. In an act of pure panic, Ash tries to reason with Flint, calling him James and telling him to wait. But of course it doesn't work, and Flint shows Ash the same amount of mercy that he was about to show him. However, Flint kills Ash slowly, driving him to the ground and forcing him to look at Mrs. Barlow's dead body as he dies. And he tells him that her word will be the last word for this place. And sad, somber music is playing in the background, which really enforces how sad of a moment this is. This isn't a triumphant moment of revenge or the good guys winning, but it's a painful bout of sorrow, as Mrs. Barlow was the only good that kept Flint grounded, or that tied him to his old life as a Navy man, and that Ash took that from him, and that Barlow's last words before she died was out of anger, condemning Ash to death. So in a sad way, he's honoring her. It's an extremely emotional and tragic scene with hints of horror, as Flint is in fact the monster that they were painting him to be, as he is participating in the murder of innocent civilians and untold carnage that's unfolding around them. However, you also feel sympathy for him and Mrs. Barlow, as they were betrayed by self-serving cowards, that they did try to reason and make peace with these people, but they were met with murder and deception. It's such a powerful scene. It kind of reminds me of the movie The Unforgiven, as Clint Eastwood's character behaved a similar way to those who displayed Morgan Freeman's character's dead body on display, much in the way Mrs. Barlow's dead body is being put on display. But it does it in a way that is reminiscent, but doesn't feel like it's copying at all. In fact, I would argue it's just as powerful. However, the moment is interrupted by Vane telling Flint to move, as Flint's life is still very much in danger and he can't let himself be distracted by Ash too much. Billy Bones, having reclaimed control of the ship, orders the cannons to fire on the Navy ships in the harbor before they have the chance to outflank them. Meanwhile, in the city, Vane and Flint have to fight their way out of the city in a series of intense gun and sword fights as soldiers patrol the streets coming after them while the city continues to explode around them from cannon fire. It's very apocalyptic. Flint and Vane have to run, jump, hide, fight, evade, and resort to tactics such as freeing slaves as a distraction in order to escape. But they eventually make their way to the docks, and it is a beautifully filmed, beautifully choreographed, intense fight scene, truly one of the most intense action sequences I've ever seen. However, the soldiers start to reclaim the cannons as Vane's men retreat, and Vane and Flint themselves make it to a dinghy and start to row towards his ship. But a group of men led by Ash's lieutenant, the very same one that murdered Mrs. Barlow, are in hot pursuit of them, and they take control of some cannons and prepare to blow Flint's dinghy out of the water. However, hiding in the smoke coming from the ruined city is Flint's ship, and it's directly in their path, and it fires cannons that obliterates Flint's pursuers. More than that, we get to specifically see Mrs. Barlow's murderer get blown away by cannonballs, which in fact was actually very satisfying. On Flint's ship, we see John Silver brought below as he's severely injured and the doctor tries to treat him. All the men who support Silver and look up to him gather around him in support. However, everyone is silent when his leggings is removed and the extent of his injury is revealed. The doctor simply says, "I'll do what I can," which really has Silver worried, and the men give him some rum to dull his pain. However, Silver really starts to panic when the doctor brings out the big knives, as it becomes clear that he means to amputate his leg. Silver begs him not to do it, telling him that he doesn't want it, but the doctor makes it clear that if he doesn't do it, he'll die. And the men vow to support him and say that they'll be there for him. Now, the scene does have a little bit of prequel-itis, as this is the same John Silver who's in Treasure Island, and of course in that book he has a peg leg, so this shows how he lost his leg, but it is still a really intense and emotional scene nonetheless. On deck of the ship, we see Flint and Vane return, and Billy Bones immediately holds the gun to Vane and explains to Flint that they had some issues while he is away. Flint looks over and sees that Vane's men are being held prisoner. He immediately orders Bones to release Vane and his men. Bones is reluctant, but Flint says that he knows what happened while he was away, but he doesn't care, as he won't hold other pirates prisoner on his ship, not after today. Meaning, the pirates basically just declared war on the British Navy, and in order to survive, they're going to have to band together. Flint just tells Vane to keep his men in line, and Vane seems to go completely along with this and be on the same page as Flint. So what follows is a beautiful montage played mostly over music with some sound effects of battle and people yelling coming through. It shows Flint moving the ship in to attack the city to destroy what's left of it. We see the solemn looks of determination of Vane and Flint, as they don't necessarily take joy in what they do, but they both feel is what needs to happen, and they don't necessarily feel sorry for those they kill, as they feel like they brought it amongst themselves. And of course, for Flint, there's definitely an element of revenge in it. It's an extremely powerful scene, but it is intercut with images of the city continuing to get demolished and people running for their lives. We even see Ash still dying on the ground, watch as tall buildings collapse and his whole city crumbles around him, which is very metaphorical as it symbolizes his world collapsing due to the choices that he made, and it perfectly shows his life is falling apart. And these are also intercut with images of John Silver as the doctor amputates his leg, where he also has to suffer through a necessary pain. The whole montage is beautiful, chilling, somber. It's one of the most powerful moments put to screen, in my opinion. It truly gets to you. So next, we see Silver wake up in Flint's office, where Flint informs him that he's been voted the new quartermaster. Flint tells him that the men will now look to him for guidance. However, Silver reveals there's something that Flint should know before they return to Nassau. That the spy he had sent to watch over the Spanish gold, who told them that it was gone and that the Spanish retrieved it, lied to them so that he could sell this information to another crew for a bigger share of the profits. Flint is simply dumbfounded by this and literally stumbles. In anger, he demands to know who the fuck did they sell the gold to. We then cut to Rackham, as Jack Rackham and Ann Body return to Nassau. Max asks them what took them so long, and Rackham replies that the information they received was incomplete, as there were still Spanish soldiers there protecting the gold and that they fought like hell. Max then noticed that Rackham returned with 2 ships when he had only left with 1, and she asks him why. Rackham replies that they needed the cargo space, and then asks if she wants to see something shiny. He then takes her to piles upon piles of gold that he had brought back, and then the episode ends. So this is meant to be a cliffhanger as Rackham retrieved the gold from Max, basically stealing it right under Flint's nose. So we're meant to question how Flint will react to this. What conflicts will this create? Is going to be a big feud between Rackham and Flint. However, in Season 3, they deflate this cliffhanger and render it useless because it was resolved off-screen and before Season 3 even starts, as at the start of Season 3, all the pirate captains already agreed to share and hide all of the gold. It kind of defeats the purpose of this cliffhanger. However, that's not this episode's fault. That's more the problem with the Season 3 premiere. However, they should have never done this cliffhanger in the first place if they didn't know how they could resolve it in a satisfying manner, but whatever. Anyway, this concludes 18. Perhaps the best episode of Black Sails, certainly concludes the best storyline of the show, which ran throughout Season 2. Not every scene in the episode was gold, as there were some less than interesting subplots and a cliffhanger ending that was rendered pointless by the next season. However, when it worked, it really worked, and in my opinion, it featured some of the most powerful moments put to screen. A truly powerful, bone-chilling tale where there were no true heroes or villains. Everything was a shade of gray, as you almost cheered for the bloodthirsty pirates who brought death and destruction to hundreds of civilians. Yet you could see the evils of the men in power that spoke for those civilians, and you certainly can identify with Flint's personally how he was disregarded and thrown away like trash several times, and finally he decided to be the monster that they said he was. It was told in an extremely powerful way with great acting, amazing cinematography, excellent editing, and music that made this a cinematic piece to behold. Which is why I chose to highlight 18 as a perfect episode. So that is it for my A Perfect Episode number 1. I'll return each month with a new installment of A Perfect Episode, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Also, in the description of this video, I'll put a link to my A Perfect Episode playlist for other videos in this series that I may add in the future. Also, be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other shows like Lower Decks, Star Trek, The Expanse, Better Call Saul, Star Wars, Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.